Hello students, welcome to 9.3. Last unit 9.2 with encoding, we were discussing the encoding of sensory stimuli into the brain. Now we're going to be talking about how we store that sensory stimuli into the brain and then later retrieve it when it's needed. So in this unit we're going to be focusing on the neuroscience or the neurological explanation for memory briefly. And so the first term that we're going to discuss in relation to neuroscience and memory is something that we've already brought up in class before. It's the term of long-term potentiation. And long-term potentiation, as we said in class, is the growth of dendrites that develop neural networks which enhance memory. But it's a little bit more complicated than that. I just wanted to give you a little introduction to it. It's a little bit more complicated than that. So let's say, for instance, another feature, another characteristic of long-term potentiation is that once a neuron fires, then it's more easily ready to fire again later. So if a neuron fires once, it's going to be ready to fire again easier the next time or more readily the next time. And then if it fires a second time, it's going to be even more ready to fire a third time, and so on and so forth, the fourth, fifth, sixth, to the millionth or billionth time a neuron is stimulated or a neuron fires, it's going to be even more ready to fire the next time. This is why relearning things, or this is why going over flashcards or things like that, it enhances memory, and it makes it easier for us to retrieve memories because our neurons are so ready to fire, which brings those memories to our conscious forethought. Okay, that is long-term potentiation. All right, so storing memories in the brain. What part of the brain is the neural center located in the limbic system that helps process explicit memories for storage, long-term memories? It's the hippocampus. It's important to note that the hippocampus is responsible for retrieving and storing long-term memories, whereas the cerebellum in the back of the brain is responsible for storing and retrieving those short-term memories or implicit memories. And we're going to talk about the difference between explicit and implicit memories. Do you guys remember, actually I'm getting ahead of myself. Do you guys remember from neuroscience the purpose of the pons in the brainstem? There's the pons right there. It's that little hump that sticks out of the brainstem. The purpose of the pons is to relay short-term memories from the cerebellum up the pons to the hippocampus and the limbic system for long-term storage. And remember, this all takes place during REM sleep, and this is what produces our dreams. Don't forget this. All right, so now let's talk about those two different types of memory, the explicit memory and implicit memory, in terms of long-term memory. Explicit memory is declarative. It's something that you can declare. I know what de-individuation is, or I know what long-term potentiation means. All right, or it can be something. Hey, I remember when I was in school when 9/11 happened, or I remember when we won that state title. Like, that's explicit, it's declarative. Whereas implicit memory is more more procedural memory, or muscle memory, if you will. It's skills or emotional conditioning. Like when you see someone frown, you know that they're sad. That's more implicit or non-declarative. Let's go into more detail. So, again, implicit memory is the retention without conscious recollection, and it's also called procedural memory. If you play golf, you utilize implicit memory, because if you've never played golf before, you have no clue what to do, you're going to be really uncoordinated. But if you have played golf, if you're an experienced golfer, then you know how to keep your head down, you know how to rotate your hips, and you know how to pull your arm through the ball and all that great stuff. While you might have to think a little bit about it, you really don't have to think too much because it's muscle memory, it's implicit. You've developed it over time in the cerebellum. Remember, implicit's in the cerebellum. Or, I don't know, what's another example of muscle memory? Working out or whatever. The next memory is explicit memory. It's a memory of facts and experiences that one can consciously know and declare. It's also called declarative because, again, you can declare that you know it. Okay? Now, oh man, what happened here? Now we're going to start talking about retrieval. There are two types of retrieval for the purposes of this course, and they are recall and recognition. Recall is the type of retrieval where you retrieve information from your memory. Okay, you have to retrieve it from your memory, not relying on any other assistance or any other aids. An example of this would be a fill-in-the-blank or essay test. Why? Because you would have to recall information from your memory, as opposed to recognition, where you must identify the target or you must recognize the correct target from a possible list of targets. So, for example, multiple choice tests is utilizing and enhancing your skills in recognition, but it doesn't really enhance your skills in recall, which is a better standard for understanding and learning and memorizing. Relearning. Relearning, it's a memory measure that assesses the amount of time saved when learning materials for a second time. When you read a book for the first time, it might take you a good chunk of time. It might take you a couple days, it might take you a week. But if you read the same book a second time, it's going to take you much less time to get through it. Why? Because you already know some of the points of the story, you already have some expectations of what's happening. So because of that, you don't have to think as much about the plot or the character development, and you can just continue reading because you pretty much know who and what is going on in the story. And it's the same thing for bold-faced words in the textbook. It's the same thing for major concepts in psychology. That's why relearning is enhanced by rehearsal, which enhances storage and retrieval of long-term memories. And then priming. This was in a previous unit, I forget which one, and many of you asked me about it, and I told you, hold on, we're going to talk about it in a later unit, and here it is. Priming is the activation, often unconsciously, of particular associations in memory. All right, this could be why sometimes you might say something idiotic in front of a group of friends because you're primed to respond in a certain way. Can you think of an example of how you would be primed to respond to seeing someone laying on a gurney in a hospital covered in a sheet? Would you just automatically assume that that was someone who was deceased? Probably. But what if it's your brother just playing a trick on you or something? I don't know. I'm speaking from life experience on this one. And then there's mood-congruent memory. This is the tendency to recall experiences that are consistent with one's current good or bad mood. So, for example, if you're in a depressed state or if you're in a state where you're easily irritable or frustrated, then you might recall your parents being a little more burdensome or overbearing than what they actually are. However, if you're, or you might recall a particular teacher or a class to be more miserable than it actually was. Another example is if you're really, really happy. If the school is out and you've got a really good GPA or you earned a really good GPA at the end of the school year, and so you were just so elated that everything's great. You know, it's 110 degrees outside, but you don't care. You love the heat. I don't care. And when you think back on your school experience, you're like, man, school was amazing. I had lots of friends. Everybody got along with me. All my teachers loved me and all this stuff. Well, you're probably forgetting some things that were not so positive. Why? Because you're such in a great mood that all the negative memories kind of fall by the wayside. And then deja vu. We still kind of don't know what causes deja vu. Deja vu, if you've never heard of it, is the eerie sense that I've experienced this before. Its cues from the current situation may subconsciously trigger retrieval of an earlier experience, whether or not we've actually had that experience. We're going to really go into detail with deja vu because it's a pretty complex concept. We're going to talk about it in theory, and we're going to talk about it through the lens of neuroscience. All right, so come to class, get ready, and be prepared. We're going to watch a Vsauce video. Just in case you're not going to be able to come to class, look up Vsauce Deja Vu. It's an awesome video.